Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today is the second part of our podcast with Julie Bronsteatter. And today we're going to talk about positive intelligence and what that means. So, Julie, welcome to the show, or welcome back.
Thank you. I am so excited to be back.
Yeah. So it's been about 7 weeks now, I think, since our first session. And just normally, I said we would ask you about your background, but obviously we did that in part one. So just could you give us a little bit of background behind what we've gone through over the last 7 weeks?
Yes. And as Michael mentioned, it's a 7-week program. So I'm going to give you all a very high level version of what Michael went through. And then we're going to go into some questions for him about his experience as well. So let's start off about what positive intelligence is. So positive intelligence is about having mastery over your own mind so you can reach your highest potential in reaching peak success and happiness. And I think those two words are really important, success and happiness, because Michael, I know you are a successful person and have seen successes throughout your life. And I know your listeners are successful people and have seen successes throughout their entire lives as well. But what I don't know is if you've been happy along the path to those successes. And I don't know if you or your listeners are happy right now. Wouldn't it be great to be both happy and successful all at once? And what Michael went through was a 7-week, what we call mental fitness boot camp. So mental fitness came out of positive intelligence. And what mental fitness means is your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive versus negative mindset. It's essentially using your brain as your friend versus your enemy. And Michael, you know, we were actually just talking about this before we started the podcast. We're still in the middle of a global pandemic, okay? Whether we like it or not, we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. If you had to quarantine, would you rather quarantine with your friend or your enemy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully that's an easy question. So the research is based on the research of positive intelligence is based on studies from hundreds of CEOs and world-class athletes all across the globe. And I think that's really important for your listeners because as you can tell all with my accent, I'm American and Michael is not. And this is not just based on US or even North America. This is global, and everything that we went through in the last 7 weeks can all be summarized in the book Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. And we can include that in, I don't know if we have episode notes or in the when we post it, we'll make sure we add a link or a call out to that book.
Yeah, we will do, absolutely.
Excellent. So just a couple quick other kind of overviews on what's included in mental fitness. There are 3 core muscles at the root of mental fitness. And those 3 core muscles are your saboteur interceptor, your sage, and your self-command muscle, which Michael, I know you got very up close and personal with all 3 of those muscles. And your listeners are like, what the heck are those? Well, your saboteur interceptor is essentially labeling and naming your judge, or what you all might know as like your inner critic or your inner gremlin, whatever you call that voice inside of you that feeds you negative thoughts, that's your judge. But your judge doesn't work alone. According to the research, there are 9 accomplice saboteurs. Saboteurs like the hyper-rational, the hyper-achiever, the hyper-vigilant, the avoider, the pleaser. And I'm sure you all are listening like, oh yeah, I know those. Oh yeah, I know those. So the saboteur interceptor is about labeling those, exposing them. Almost think about you're in a haunted house. When you turn the lights on, those gremlins and ghosts and ghouls are a lot less scary when they're exposed. So that's all about that's the saboteur interceptor muscle. Your sage is opposite. So that's about accessing your positive side of your brain. This is where you can access, creativity, empathy, purpose, and passion. And you can access these powers through what the book and the research calls the sage perspective. And the sage perspective is about finding the gifts and opportunities through any outcome or circumstance, which I know that can be a lot to hear. And I'm going to ask Michael about his experience in finding the sage perspective. So I'll be excited to hear about that, Michael, but we'll get to that further on in the conversation. And then your self-command muscle is essentially weightlifting for your brain. Okay, the research actually shows that MRI data, if you focus on a specific sensation for as little as 10 seconds, in MRI data, the positive side of your brain actually starts lighting up. And what I mean by, specific sensory exercises, and Michael, if you don't mind doing this with me, but it's rubbing two fingers together with such a tension that you can feel the ridges on both of your fingertips. So what we're doing there, thank you, Michael, for participating in that. Hopefully you all participated in that as well. What we're doing there is commanding our mind to quiet, to get into our bodies and feel something so specific, because when we're out of our heads, the mind chatter quiets. And when we come out of this, meditative exercise, I'm not going to deny that this isn't a form of very beginner meditation, but we come out and we're feeling much more clear-headed to be able to respond versus react to a situation. So that's a little bit about positive intelligence. And there is a bit of a formula as well. So if you're feeling a negative emotion, stop. You're being hijacked. And then I would recommend working out your self-command muscle. So doing a sensory type exercise for a few minutes. And then once you're more clear-headed, then what you can do is start seeing the sage perspective, start finding the gifts and opportunities in whatever, situation that you're in. So that's the positive intelligence 101. Just giving a little bit of an overview on what Michael went through for the last 7 weeks. Does that seem like a good overview, Michael, or do you want to learn more?
No, I think that sums it up in a really great nutshell, really. It kind of reminds me of everything that sort of we've gone through. And the one, I suppose, whether or not you want to come on to this a bit later on, but the one question that people might be asking, so how does this relate to leadership, and specifically leadership in construction? Why is having good mental fitness important in leadership?
Yes, what a great question. I think everyone knows and has been part of or in a role where somebody has really reacted to a situation, right? And when we see that, we're like, oh gosh, we're reacting to everything. We're not being proactive, or we're not responding in the way that we should be responding. When we're more mentally fit, we have the capacity to take a step back, assess a situation, and then move forward the way we want to move forward, and not the way maybe our mind is telling us we have to move forward. And when we have more mentally fit leaders, we then have more mentally fit employees across the board, because a lot of times, and Michael, I'll want to hear your perspective on this as well, when you're practicing that in front of, other people, it can be magnetic, right? And then you can start seeing the effects on others.
That's true. It's infectious. It's like an act of kindness. I think when you perform an act of kindness, it triggers off hormones like serotonin and oxytocin and things like that. And even just witnessing a sign of kindness from two other people's exchange, that releases the same hormone in yourself, and it becomes infectious, and then you're more likely to be kind and empathetic towards them. It just grows, and as I say, it's infectious, and it moves from person to person without having to be even part of that role. So I think the more that you can emulate those kind of behaviors of positivity, and the people that you're interacting with become more positive, but also the people witnessing it as well can be more positive as well. So I think it definitely, that's an accurate summary.
Great. What else can I explain before we dive into some questions that I have for you?
I think I'm not sure there's anything else to really explain. I think let's just dive into questions, I think.
Okay, great. So I know, Michael, when we first had our podcast, this was not really, the intent was for you to go through this program. And I found it so fascinating with how much you're dedicated to improving not just your leadership, but leadership as a whole within the construction industry. Mm-hmm. So what were your expectations and goals going into this program?
Can I be honest? I want to be really authentic and honest, because I want
it to be.
I honestly didn't know what I was letting myself in for. And I think the tendency when you hear things like we're going to do sort of like meditation and things like that, not an eye roll, but just to think, no, I'm not doing that. That's too uncomfortable. I won't be doing that. How can meditating or even just, commanding the mind help in leading and being successful? That just doesn't work. What I realize now, having gone through that those voices I'm hearing are actually coming from my judges and my saboteurs that are getting in my way of being successful and things like that. So I sort of came into this with an open mind. I've sort of been an experiment, absolutely nothing to lose. And what I want to find out about mental fitness and positive intelligence is how can we relate it into leadership, and how can we help change the construction industry, which is my mission, through the use of positive intelligence. And actually, having gone through this process, a good mental fitness and having a positive intelligence, you can't change the construction industry to what we want it to be without good mental fitness and education of mental fitness. So I think this is a relatively new concept. So I think at first, like I did, it's going to get met with resistance. But the more we learn about it, and particularly that it's like the first 3 or 4 weeks, the more you learn about your judge and your saboteurs, and you start to see the impact that your commanding your mind can have. It completely changes perspective and spurs you to go on, keep going. And I think my mental state, before we started this, I wasn't in a great place anyway, personally. And I didn't expect going through this process to completely change that. And I would be as bold to say that having gone through this process, it has completely changed my life, that this is a practice that I will be changing practice that I will be working on for the rest of my life. So I genuinely do think it's completely changed my thoughts, my perspective, and my life. I don't know if that answers your original question, but
it does. And I appreciate the honesty there as well, that, that's what are not the first person to say, I'm not a meditator. This is not going to change my life. And you're not the first person to go through the program and say, wow, was I wrong? Okay. So, and what I love that you just said there was, you see how it can affect the industry, but how it affects the construction industry is one person at a time, right? So instead of you just thinking about how you can apply it, you needed to take it yourself, right? And actually start seeing the impact on yourself to see then how it could really impact.
I think this comes back to what our original podcast, our part 1 podcast was all about, which was walk the talk. And if I'm preaching this stuff, I've got to be willing to go through this stuff myself. And I think, again, that's one of the key aspects of being a leader is being able to walk the talk, being authentic, and being honest about your experiences and understanding other people's experiences.
Yeah. Well, and we thank you for that. And I hope the listeners thank you for that as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the meditation part of the program, which I know the word meditation can have a bit of a stigma around it, because people are like, I'm either a meditator or not. And the beauty of the exercises that we do within this program is, like I said in the initial intro, these are meditative like exercises. Okay. This is like meditation 101. So you don't have to be in what people view as a quote unquote meditative mindset to get yourself into a more clear-headed space. You can actually do these exercises any place, anytime, anywhere, eyes open, eyes closed. In fact, you all don't know it, but I'm doing some of these exercises right now to keep me in a positive space during this conversation. So the research calls these exercises PQ reps. So we're familiar with EQ being your, emotional intelligence quotient, your IQ being your intellectual quotient. Your PQ is your positive intelligence quotient. So PQ reps are what the research calls these meditative exercises. So Michael, you really embraced this idea of PQ reps pretty early on in the program. And I have to say, I was a little bit surprised. So tell us how these exercises have impacted you and continue to.
I think I was taken back at the start about how much of an impact the PQ reps make such a difference. And these reps are literally just 2 minutes long. Like the shortest you can do is 2 minutes long. And if you consistently do 2 minutes, like every 3 hours or so, it can have a completely dramatic effect straight away. And that, I think, seeing the impact and the positivity coming out and my ability to sort of notice when I was getting hijacked, I think that spurred me on. That inspired me to keep going, like bit more inquisitive, like, okay, actually, this is actually helping. There's something in this that I think we need to explore further. And I think, when people hear meditation, they think about incense and earth crystals and things like that. It's none of that. It's as you say, it is just 2 minutes. Just it's kind of like it's getting yourself into a space which is quiet, and it is refreshing. It's like almost getting a splash of fresh water in your face. It's really refreshing. Kind of wakes you up and gets you into that space when you're ready to tackle whatever the day has to throw at you. So, I tend to try and plan in PQ reps before and after meetings, that kind of thing. So it's really easy to work into a day. And occasionally I've started to work it inside of meetings with other people, and you get looked at with like you've got 3 heads or something like that initially. But I think it's all about, as you say, the more you emulate and lead by example, people will sort of follow, and then people find that it'll help them as well.
And thank you for walking the talk then with such, that was brave to bring that into some meetings there where people were probably like, what are we doing? We're going to center ourselves before we start this conversation.
Yeah, but I think it does in a way sound a bit silly, but when you don't understand the whole process, I think from an outsider's perspective, it can seem like that. I think you've got to really go through this to see that it makes complete logical sense. Because on a typical day, you might have 3 or 4 or even more meetings or general interactions with other people. And particularly in the construction industry, we're trying to work together with individuals to move a project forward or find a resolution, find a solution. And before doing all this, what I found that got in my way was my own perceptions, my own perspectives, and what I wanted to do. And getting to understand the saboteurs was like getting out of my own way. It was like realizing that the saboteurs are in the way of me being able to be successful, and I might be diving ahead a little bit. Do you mind if I give an example?
No, go for it.
So one of the lessons that you sort of get taught towards the end of the process is about your power of inspiration.
Okay.
The power of innovation. So the exercise that you get in the training is this yes and concept, whereas you tend to agree with 10% of whatever someone says is 10% correct and you agree with. But if you use the yes and, so that you can identify that 10% that you do agree with and then build upon that idea. You enter into this space where it's really collaborative working together. So I did that probably instinctively before I did that lessons, but even today in a meeting I had with a contractor, I used that yes and process because I'd done a few PQ reps before. I was very zen, I was very sort of in a good positive frame of mind. I didn't want to sit here and argue with the contractor. The contractor just wants to get on with the job. The client just wants to see a good outcome. I just don't want to get in anybody's way. So what I did was, sort of identify the bits that I did agree on and then built on that. And right at the beginning of the conversation, before we'd really got into talking about anything serious, I could also sense that the contractor was frustrated and already wanting a fight. But because I eased off and was very patient and positive and acknowledged the bits that I did agree with and the bits that, we could build on and work together, by the end of the call, which was probably only a 45 minutes exchange, we were both really pleased with the outcome of the meeting. We both agreed actions forward, and we're both in a very positive way forward mind thinking, solution oriented thinking. Whereas before going through all this, I think that the tendency is to, if you feel someone being frustrated, is to get your back up and start to fight that and get against that. Because I think you feel that as an attack on yourself, whereas your judge is effectively attacking you, not the actual person. I think that's the distinction. And so what I didn't allow to happen in that scenario was allow my judge to hijack me. I was very patient and a very good sage perspective, and was able to see all of that exchange of conversation as an opportunity to grow and build. So there's an example where it can work.
Yes. The yes and game is such a great tool to not only flex your collaboration muscle, but also to flex your active listening muscle. Mm-hmm. So many times when we go into conversations like that, we have an agenda, the other person has an agenda. And when the other person is talking, you find the things that you don't like. And all you're thinking about right then is how you're going to combat it, how you're going to, react to that. And you're thinking about your response versus actually listening to the other person. Mm-hmm. So when you're listening and trying to find the things that you like about it, and everything that you don't like about it, you can put to the wayside and build. And then, like you said, it ended up being super collaborative, and it sounds like you ended in a really nice compromise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. I do want to go back a little bit, just to make sure that we hit on kind of all aspects of the program.
Yeah, sorry, because my mind shoots and fires in all directions.
I like an organic conversation, but I want to go back to the first week. Because Michael, if you recall, you had a lot of technical difficulties the first week. Michael didn't have a phone for a couple of days. It was not an ideal setting.
No, it was not, unfortunately. I really sort of, I'm annoyed with myself for those few, but it would mean, as I say, like the technical problems you can't overcome. And I think I probably needed the process at that time to overcome that. And I said, I think that I would be right in saying that I think you probably felt frustrated or agitated by the scenario in that my technology hadn't been working, so I wasn't able to get the fulfillment out of this. And you really got to start right to finish right, I think, haven't you? And I felt like I owed it to yourself and owed it to listeners and viewers to really put my all into this. So yes, what we managed to work out something where I could do some of it online on a laptop, but all of it has to be done on the app. And then when you get your head into the app, it's such a great app. I mean, there's a lot of things I didn't know how to do until like week 6, which would have been more beneficial earlier weeks.
No, that's all right. And you're right. In full transparency, that first week when you didn't have technology access, I thought about, do we postpone the program? I want to make sure he's getting the most out of this. What if he feels like this is a failure of a process and the whole point is to be more mentally fit? But instead, I pivoted We found alternative ways of moving forward. And I was really proud of both of us that week. So I want to know, what kept you motivated in that first week to really do the best that you could without the technology that you needed?
It's a good question, because if I want to be really authentic and really honest, there was a lot of things. First of all, I felt like I owed it to you. Like, you're giving up time and resource in order to do this process. And I want to also really trial this to its full degree to see if it works and how it can work. So I felt like I owed it to my mission to changing the construction industry. But also I was curious, because it seemed like it would, at that time in my life, have a big impact if it was, what I thought it was. And so in a way, it was kind of like a fight or flight sort of thing. I could have right, I'm going to run away scared because, it's not working. So let's just go away. Or I could fight it and go, no, let's just try and make this work and just keep storming ahead. And I think that's what I did, because I think I recognized in myself those first week or two that we talked about, I needed to become more positive and more patient, because my stress, anxiety was at such a level where I was losing the ability to kind of function in a positive way, to the point where it's affecting relationships around me. And I sort of thought that, do you know what, this I'm not saying I thought this could be the answer, but I certainly thought this could if this could make a difference, that would be impactful. So what spurred me on was my commitment to you, my commitment to my mission, and my commitment to not wanting to feel so negative all the time, because there was seriously some bad days. And through the 7 weeks, I honestly do believe I've come out at the other end a completely different person. The challenge now at the end of this is to keep up with the PQ reps and that process in doing it, because now there was no accountability. So the good thing was, I knew every Tuesday I was going to get a phone call with Julie, and she was going to challenge me on all the things that I hadn't done, which spurred me on to make sure I did it. So that was what kept me going. In a way, that was one of the things that kept me going. But now I haven't got that accountability check to say, you've not been doing your PQ reps, why haven't you, sort of thing. So it's now a willingness of yourself to get through this. So yeah, that at the beginning, it was all about kind of fight or flight. And do I fight, or do I just cave and give in? I think I chose to fight.
Yeah. Can I make a few observations?
Absolutely.
It sounds like the way you started this program was very much through the lens of your judge, right? You needed to fight. You felt like you owed it to me. You needed to be more positive. You needed to support your mission. And then I was hearing a little bit of Sage when you said, and then I was curious. And I even noticed like a little change in the tone of your voice when you started to talk about curiosity. And that, everyone, is an example of the needs. I have to fight. That is a judge statement. And when you start thinking about curiosity or collaboration, Michael was talking about the yes and game. That very much comes from a more positive side. That's a pulling sensation. Our judges push us. Our sage, which is what the research calls the positive side of our brain, our sage pulls us. So you could even hear the difference. And I'd be interested if people rewound and listen to the tone of your voice in when you were talking about like, I need to be positive, versus if you said, I want to be positive. Yeah. What comes up when you hear that?
What comes up when I hear that? Basically, that I think there's still a lot of work to do, because a lot of this is about intercepting and identifying those sort of saboteurs And I'm very good at sort of identifying things retrospectively and thinking, oh, that's what that was, and less sort of in the moment that being able to intercept it. So sort of hearing that sort of makes me think that this is the long game, and the more and more practice, the more gym sessions you put in, and the more you hold yourself accountable, the more that this will continue to work for you and work quicker for you. The more able you are to become positive and find solutions quicker if you follow through on those steps of PQ reps, and you can lean on the lessons that you learn of the sage perspective. And I've tried to start a few other things again in my life since going through this course, and again I hear it more and more now. The saboteurs and the judge coming in saying, you can't do this, you're well over your head, no way, don't do it, stop, pull back. And I can hear it, and usually the tendency would be to drown it out with other conflicting voices, but I learned that's just more saboteurs. Now I just sort of kind of let it wash over me, listening to those kind of voices and just sort of releasing it and get it in the sage perspective. And I think I would get it through it quicker if I was doing more PQ reps, but the sage perspective kicks in and says, just keep going, you're doing fine, not to worry yourself too much.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned was about how important keeping up with the practices, and the research talks about this, and I'm sure this research isn't the first to say that when you learn something new, it's 20% insight but 80% mental muscle. So you have to actually put everything that you learned to practice to create a new habit, or, to really get the full benefit of the learning.
Yeah, so I've got about another 35 weeks of practice before really I know it.
There you go. So you've already talked a lot about your judge, and I want to dig in a little bit more. So for everyone listening, the judge, as I mentioned, is like your inner critic. Okay. This is what the research calls the master saboteur. So everybody has this saboteur. It was developed early on for survival. This is where your coping mechanisms came from. And you've been working out with your judge for a long time. And the judge has 3 different modes. Judgment of self and others, I think, is pretty self-explanatory and ones that we understand. The 3rd mode is the judgment of circumstances. And this is the quintessential I'll be happy when syndrome. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when I get married. I'll be happy when I win the lottery. Okay. But research even shows that even those people that reach the quote unquote pinnacle of happiness on winning the lottery, that soon after they go back to their baseline of happiness on what they felt before they won the lottery. So they're still going like, I'll be happy when I win the lottery again, or whatever the case may be. So knowing that you got really up close and personal with your judge, I'm curious what you really discovered about your judge that kind of surprised you.
I just by how much it controls and hijacks and drives my decisions, and how much it just really sort of puts me down. I'm going to talk personally because I think this relates to a lot of people, but I was surprised by how much it just self-defecating it is, like putting myself down. And I think, if we want to be successful, you've got to, that self-defecating, that self-disbelief in yourself, then I don't think you can be successful without it, or you can, but not to your full potential. So really, it sort of surprised me by how loud it actually was, and how much, if I can remove that out of the way, I can be successful.
And I love that you're talking about the judge almost in the 3rd person, which is exactly what the program is all about. So your judge and your saboteurs are characters, essentially, that live in your brain. And we separate them out and call them characters for a reason, because your true self would not beat the crap out of you, wouldn't tell you those things that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can't do that. Your true self wouldn't do that. But your judge and these 9 accomplice saboteurs, which we'll talk a little bit more about, they have no problem feeding you these lies. And that's the key of the program is exposing them. Because the second you start seeing that judge, it's like, whoa, you are around a lot. Thank you for stopping by. I see you. I got to get myself into a different perspective. I got to get myself into a different headspace.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what surprised me the most. And then when you talk about the accomplice saboteurs, I might be getting a bit too early, but
no, this is good.
But then when you start realizing that this judge who was constantly, hating on me and fueling a lot of my negativity, there was other accomplice saboteurs who were doing the same, and some that, as I say, stepped out into the light because of going through this process. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've really grasped some of the accomplice saboteurs yet, but I can see them, and I can see that, particularly the avoider, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But one of my biggest saboteurs is the avoider, so I tend to avoid circumstances which are difficult or seem difficult until it gets to the critical mass, and it explodes. So I sort of recognize that more now, and to be able to deal with that as you're avoiding it really requires a lot of mental fitness and positive intelligence. And so that I recognize that the judge I'm much more better at dealing with now, whereas the avoider I still need a lot of work on in identifying it and using all these PQ reps and the sage perspective to navigate those situations where there's the avoider. So again, like I say, having gone through this process, I'm starting a few new ventures on my own, and the judge has told me that this is well out of my depth. No way can you do this. You're an idiot to think that you're able to do this. I'll be able to hear it and avoid and be able to sidestep it and navigate around it. And even the avoiders come in at certain times like, just don't worry, don't do it. You give yourself a break, just put it on the back burner. You weren't really going to do it anyway. I've sort of started to hear a bit more. And what I have done, which is probably not quite the right thing, is force myself into doing some of the activities that the avoider is telling me not to do, which kind of leaves me a feeling of like dread and resentment. Whereas if I tackled the avoider with PQ repping and being a more sage, I would be much more positive about doing the activity. And I have to say it's getting better, but it's one of those things like I've got 30 whatever weeks to still practice really before I become the master. So yeah, it's something that you've got to keep sort of working on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a couple of things that I want to point out based on what you said. First of all, as it relates to which saboteur you're getting hijacked by, it really doesn't matter. I mean, for you, I know you want to work on your avoider, but for the listeners, what matters the most is that you recognize when you're being hijacked. That is the most important part. If you can't really identify or label, is this my judge? Is this a specific saboteur? All that matters is that you know that you're being hijacked. You pause, you do some PQ reps, and you start trying to see the sage perspective. But I do want to dig a little bit deeper as it relates to the avoider, since you did bring that up, Michael. So when the avoider is present, and you even talked about, sometimes, I'll just push myself to get it done. Like if I know I'm avoiding it, I'm going to push myself, which is a saboteur bringing on another saboteur, right? Mm-hmm. Because, your listeners might be thinking, yeah, I hear you, Julie, this, your judge and your saboteurs, they're negative, but like they've pushed me. I am successful because of them. And I think Michael's demonstrating this right now, but at what cost? Do you prefer negative reinforcement or do you prefer positive reinforcement? And he even said, if I did some PQ reps, perhaps I would have been more pulled to do whatever task I was avoiding versus being pushed to doing that. So in thinking about that, when your avoider is present, who are you when your avoider is present?
Who Who am I? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I can describe that it's not a very nice feeling. It's a very negative sort of feeling. And it's quite stress and anxiety inducing, I would go as far as saying. Um, when I'm pushing myself into situations that I know is probably beneficial for me, but I don't want to do it, I'm getting stressed, more anxious, but I'm also not performing at my peak performance. So I'm probably only performing at 10% of what I could do. So when I come in from a sage perspective and it's actually much more positive, I'm definitely coming at it with a lot more clout, and I'm able to be more innovative and just be able to solve problems quicker and look at absolutely everything as an opportunity and a gift. Whereas coming at it through a saboteur perspective about being pushed, it's very much just getting it done for getting it done's sake. Oh, I did it, fantastic, it's done. And I guess I think I probably did this a lot before I went through this process, but only sort of really identifying it and understanding it now is that I far want to achieve something positive than just achieve something, if that makes sense. So rather than just getting something on action or an activity done, I want to get it done, but get it to its fullest potential and really experience it and really learn from it. If you're not doing that, then I just don't think you're really positively or happy. You're not really happy in that process. It's my personal experience anyway.
Yeah. You're defining positive intelligence again, right? Mastery over your own mind so you can reach your highest potential for peak success and happiness. It's exactly what you're describing right there.
And just so that people know, that's not like words put in my mouth. That's just what I'm thinking. I'm just trying to describe what I've experienced, what I'm feeling, and this is honest. I've been through this mental fitness. Like, I've definitely been able to solve problems quicker, not only at work, more positively, in which my peers see me at an elevated level, but also in relationships at home as well, like being able to, not I don't want to say avoid, but solve conflicts in relationships quicker and much more positive, with a much more positive outcome at the end. And so this positive intelligence isn't just for the workplace and for the construction industry, but it's kind of like a way of life, and it impacts all elements of your life. And the minute that you start to understand your three core muscles and how you can deploy them in your life, you can see you can do it in all walks of life.
Yeah, the research calls it an operating system, and it shows how you can apply it to all aspects of life. So that's a great reinforcement. I want to stay talking about the sage perspective now. You know, you've talked a lot about, the positivity and how you're being pulled. So you learned that the sage perspective is that in any circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity. So how has the program allowed you to see the gifts in what could have been labeled as bad or a challenging situation?
I think there's loads of examples that I could draw on. And I think the one that will resonate with people most is sort of one of the lessons I learned towards the end, that when Shiraz, I think I pronounced Shazad, when they said it, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Like, I didn't think about it from that perspective. But I think most people will resonate when you have to deal with quote unquote difficult people, or I mean, I certainly, there are certain instances where, I dread going into that meeting because such and such is going to be there, or I hate going into that situation because of those group of people. And that can be a really negative response, sort of not wanting to get into those situations or speak to those people because of the triggering of your own judge, your own saboteurs, and it just makes you feel negative. But what it's helped me to do is to recognize those situations as being an opportunity for building my own three core muscles and building up my my own positive intelligence. So when you're met with prickly people, that people might, sort of bring out your judge, bring out your saboteurs, and that you find are difficult. They're great opportunities for me to be able to practice my positivity, so sort of really see it as an opportunity. And as we said at the beginning, the more that I do that, because it's infectious, it draws out other people's positivity. And I think the reason for that is you get to know people like, don't go speaking to that person if you want to pitch something positive because they'll just be negative about it. We probably know everybody, one person at least in our organization or in our construction or in our sector, whatever that's like that. And so you avoid it, you don't go and talk to that person. And I think that's completely the opposite of what we're meant to be doing. We're meant to be getting the perspective of everybody. But if you feel like you're going to those conversations and it's not the person you'd really have that conversation with or such, then your negativity is going to feed their negativity, and their negativity is going to feed your negativity. But if you go into it very positive and you use that opportunity to work on your positivity, and it might not be the first encounter or the second or the third encounter, but over time, the more that you do that with that one person or that one group of people or whatever, the more that your positivity starts to rub off on them, and your positivity brings out their positivity. And I think that's one of the sort of the big sort of lessons that I've sort of really learned around seeing that. And even I was getting to the point where I want to avoid speaking to that person. I want to avoid that meeting. I want to avoid the situations. And actually thinking, well, actually, it's a really good perspective, a really good sage perspective to sort of say, I now see that as an opportunity to work on myself. And by doing so, because I'm more positive and I can find solutions in being positive, the other person or other people are finding that they're becoming more positive. I refer back to my example earlier about having that conversation with the contractor about being positive, and they sort of start to calm down and realize, okay, Mike isn't triggering my saboteurs, and Mike's actually creating a safe environment in which I don't have to be as aggressive or be as frustrated, so it's a lot easier situation. I'm not getting met with resistance and I'm being heard. And as I say, straight away, it can make a really meaningful, impactful impact. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, you're showing how energy attracts like energy. Whether you bring a negative perspective to a conversation or a positive perspective, you can see the ripple effect of both. And I remember a conversation we had, Michael, where you said, like, there was a conversation I was going into, and if before this program, I would not have been excited to go. And I actually went in excited to turn it into a positive experience. And it worked.
True. Yeah. And there was some occasions where I would keep a diary, like almost an hour by hour diary, just recording how I was feeling, what I was doing at that time, what meeting I had been in, who I had been meeting, and what were they triggering my saboteur? Was I able to go into a sage perspective? Did that work? Did that then, reflect on them as well? And being able to read back through that helped me to sort of identify patterns about where these things were sort of happening, and sort of give me some pointers of where to sort of work on a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go into a specific sage power. I want to go into empathy. So I think in week 5, there's a really powerful visualization, which incorporates a childhood photo to help you remember the essence of who you really are. So tell us about your experience with that exercise and how you're using it to access more empathy in your life.
It's good because so looking back at the old photos and really sort of just looking at it and thinking about who was this little person you know, when I was 5 years old. So my photos when I was about 5 years old. I was sat on a train and I had this teddy, which was Postman Pat, which I know in America you might not be too familiar with. But in the UK, we all know who Postman Pat is. And that same teddy has now been passed down to my son, who looks after it for me. And I looked at this boy, and he's just grinning on a train. And I was on the train with my dad, and it's not a trip that me and my dad would usually take. And just remembering about how happy, safe I must have felt and was, and how happy. I even asked my mom, you know, do you remember what I was like as that child? Because I struggled to sort of remember. And she would describe me as the performer. You know, I was always sort of doing something and acting or, you know, very positive and very sort of happy. And it just sort of made me think, well, where did it go wrong? Where did I stop being positive and outgoing and courageous? And actually, I don't think I have stopped it. I think it's just all these other sort of saboteurs that come in and you know, and I think if I reflect, and it helped me to sort of reflect again on my career a little bit, in that I was this sort of happy, outgoing person, and the draws of these, as Simon Sinek would call it, these finite games around profit and program and things like that, drew me into this very sort of negative space about only thinking about resources and program and time and money and things like that. And that's not really inspiring. And that's sort of what drove me into this really sort of negative space, I believe. And the more I sort of learned about leadership and what I want the construction industry to be and what I want to emulate as a leader, I started to find actually I am still this little boy. I am still got all these, the performer, the courageous, the happy, the outgoing elements. But what I was being met with on a daily basis, that everybody is these saboteurs. So it really helped me to sort of empathize. And I think, so my saboteurs, as I said before, was really hitting down on me saying, you know, you can't do this. You know, my saboteur would tell me I'm useless. Why would you do this? You absolutely, to the point where it would even, you know, destroy my own self-image about myself. And I thought after going through that empathize on myself, I started to be so less harsh on myself and realize that, you know, I'm not perfect. But then again, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be me and trying to do some good in the world and trying to help other people. And I think that's a good thing to do that. And, you know, maybe nobody's perfect. And so I sort of came up with this phrase that I'm perfectly imperfect. That's the whole thing around it, and sort of realized that really helped me to sort of go less harsh on myself. But then I had to turn it on other people and imagine other people as their child selves. And I don't know whether it sounds cheesy or corny or what, but it made me sort of see the essence of people. Like, okay, actually, these people are just the same. You know, they were happy and a bit outgoing and just wanted to play games. And then I've got children of that age, and I can just sort of see, just so innocent, just so engrossed in something and happy about it. And we over time get met by these saboteurs and just sort of, in a way, give in to these saboteurs. So this empathy of yourself, giving yourself a bit of a break, realizing your mission in life isn't to be perfect. Your mission is just to be happy. That really sort of made me happy with myself. So I stopped self-defecating about the way I looked or whatever, and certainly put me in a much more happier, positive position.
Wow. That was a really powerful response. Very powerful. And I love how you talked about, you know, trying to envision other people's, you know, childhood photo and see the essence of them. I actually have a photo of my husband as a little, I don't know, he's probably 3 right here. And anytime we get into a disagreement, I just look at him and I just want to squeeze his cheeks. And, you know, you remember, you know, you try and remember and put yourself into that other person's essence. And it does make it lessen the negativity. It might not flip it on its head and turn it to roses and sunshine. And that's not what we're trying to say here, that, you know, the second you're more mentally fit, you can see everything through, you know, rose-colored glasses. it's about just not being able to see the negative. You see a situation for what it is. You see a person for who they are, and you have the choice on how you want to respond to that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to make that point, because that's true. I don't go through life thinking, "Oh, this is all fantastic," and no, it's right. It's about seeing things as they are, and then we can just sort of. It's like looking at everything objectively rather than subjectively. I think that's really powerful. Once you look at things objectively, look at yourself objectively, not judge yourself and empathize with yourself, but also empathize with others. That's when you can sort of really manage conflict better, manage situations better, manage innovation and creativity better. So, it's essential to being successful. And if I'm serious about changing the construction industry, it's absolutely imperative that we deploy more empathy towards one another and towards ourselves.
Yeah. Let's talk about all of the sage powers for a moment, just to give everyone kind of a peek under what those powers are. So there's 5 sage powers. We talked about empathy. There's the explore power, which is all about staying very curious about a situation. There's the innovate power, which Michael gave an example of. That's the yes and game. So it's about being creative and generating ideas. There's the navigate power, which is about really considering your own values and how this situation is impacting those. And then finally, there's the activate power, which is all about moving into what Shirzad will call laser focused action. So which power would you say, Michael, and I have a feeling I already know this, but which power do you use the most, and which power do you want to use more?
So there's a bit of a tie, I think, because I might have this wrong. Empathy?
There's no wrong answer.
Okay. So I say, I think I used to have empathy in bucket loads before I got drawn into these finite games about profit and profit margins and programs. I definitely deploy and work on empathy for others and empathy for myself a lot more. The other thing that I sort of, as I said, I think I used to do a bit more intuitively, but now I'm a bit more aware of it, is the innovate, which is the yes and thing. And every single time I deploy those tools, that game of yes and it always ends up as being a very positive outcome conversation. And I think the key thing about that is at the end of those meetings, at the end of those conversations, I feel more motivated to go and follow through my actions. And the person, and when I do, the person knows that they can trust me and that I'm being honest and authentic. And if I may have made a mistake or something, and being honest and open about that, it builds trust. It builds like, okay, I can rely on Mike because he's going to approach this in a positive way and he's going to be honest. So whether he's right or wrong, he's going to be positive about it and he's not going to try and fight it. And he just wants the right outcome for this. So the once people start thinking about you in that way and that you're trustworthy, I'll say trustworthy, I hate that word actually, forget trustworthy, that you can be dependable and authentic, then people start to do the same in return. So innovate, as opposed, people think innovate about groundbreaking new inventions. I don't think it has to be as big as that. It can literally just be about trying to find a different way through things. So, in that conversation I had today with a contractor, we found 2 different ways of doing things that maybe would have done something different in the past, but it could give us an outcome that will be beneficial for everybody. So it's like a really positive way forward. So those are the 2 really that I think I found that I connect with a lot more. The activate, and I don't know if I got that right, but the activate one is the one that I think I need to work on a lot more, which is, I think I've mentioned before, is and I have done this to a certain degree. So the activate is about anticipating saboteurs and being ready to intercept and to be in a safe place. So I did have a couple of instances through that process of knowing that situation, I'm going to be met with saboteurs and getting to a safe place to deal with that. And I think that happened for a whole day on 2 occasions, which you and I have spoken about quite a bit. and having that sage perspective of being more positive completely changed the outcome of those days. But the sort of interesting thing about that is when I was sort of anticipating when the saboteurs would come, I would just obsess and become hyper vigilant about that the night before. So I'd be stressing, worrying and panicky. Okay, how am I going to deal with this? What do I need to do? And try to over plan for things and be really fearful of what was going to come. And that's wasted and lost time that I'll never get back now. I look back and think, God, I wasted that whole evening worrying about the day before. That because, okay, again, it's about the push. I was pushed into planning to be sage and all this kind of stuff, which was then pulling. So, it was very, and it was very sort of negative to sort of be able to sort of have lost that time from worry. Then in reality, in the end, it actually worked out to be okay. So in terms of working on my activate, I will be able to, worry less the night before about the day ahead and approach it in a very even better sage perspective.
So it sounds like you're giving an example on how you can really flex the saboteur interceptor muscle. So just for the listeners, activate is all about moving into laser focused action. So Michael, remember when we spun the wheel? I had you spin the wheel of opportunities.
Yes,
and
yes.
You had to, you did an action for the week. So what you were describing is great. And anticipating the saboteurs is 100% a great tool in the saboteur interceptor muscle. And reflection is a great tool as well. When you think back on a situation and you're like, man, I wish I wouldn't have responded that way. Here's how I want to respond. The more you think about the way you want to respond, the more chances you have of responding that way the next time, or the time after that, or the time after that. So reflection and repetition are really great ways to flex that saboteur interceptor muscle.
Can I just pick up on something about that wheel of opportunity that you mentioned?
Sure.
So, as people will remember from the first part of our podcast, is that you do this every week and blog or vlog about it in your video series about spinning the wheel of opportunity and landing on something, and that's your action for the week. Well, that week that we did that, I landed on read 2 chapters of a book, and for the first part, it was very much Julie's going to test me on this next week. I'm going to have to read it. You've got to read it. A lot of pressure, a lot of stress around doing that. It was very much a push because I had accountability there. It was all about, okay, I've got to get that done before this next meeting. Otherwise, I'm going to be embarrassed to sort of say that I didn't read those 2 chapters or whatever. And I think we always have that. We have regular design team meetings or construction meetings. And if we had actions from the week before that we haven't followed through from, we're pushed to make sure we try and get those actions done or pretend that they're done, but we know reality, they're not completely done. We may be done a little bit. And we always feel that. But also I've got to push myself to get to that next meeting, that next workshop, so that we've done those actions from before. And that push-pull is very important, because the minute I started to do BQ reps and get myself into more sage perspective, it was I'm wanting to read those pages. I want to, because I know it's going to be relaxing. I know it's going to be better than watching Netflix for a couple of hours in an evening. So the more I started to look at it as a gift and an opportunity, the more I started to realize actually I was pulled towards reading those 2 chapters rather than pushed, because I knew Julie was going to pull me up on it. And I think if we apply that to meetings in specifically in the construction sector, when we're going from week to week, trying to complete the actions on a minute, which I know I do, try and get myself, and I'll do this, try and get myself into a more sage perspective and see it as an opportunity and a gift. That means that I'm positively approaching those actions rather than negatively being pushed to complete those actions because I've got another meeting coming up in a week's time and I've got to have it done by then. I think that's really impactful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And everyone, I'm not super scary. If he didn't read the 2 chapters, I wasn't going to harp on him.
No, and you didn't. No.
But that is a really good example on the pressure that your saboteurs and your judge put on you. And here it was something at the end of the day that you wanted to do, right? You want to be a reader, you want to read. And once you have that type of perspective, it's a lot easier to tackle that action.
And I think, if I'm right in remembering, when you spun the wheel of opportunity last week, your action was to finish a book you started?
Finish a book I started. It's this book.
Think Again by Adam Grant. Yeah.
Think Again by Adam Grant. It's also serving as my.
I was going to say, propping up your microphone. So hopefully that means that's it. It's finished. It's now serving a different purpose.
Yes, it is finished.
And I think I saw that as, okay, well, if Julie can do that, well, then I'm going to try and reread, or I tried to read Atomic Habits. I'm going to get the author's name right. I think it's Adam Clear.
James Clear.
James.
I think.
There we go.
Yeah, we'll get it together.
And I found parts of that book really tough because of saboteurs and because of feeling pushed to read it rather than pulled to read it. And I think that's important as well. And you sort of just mentioned there about the more that you identify as wanting to be a reader, be known or know yourself as a reader, that's the first part of creating good habits, is getting in touch with and knowing who it is that you want to be, and then asking yourself, is that what a reader would do? Would someone that reads books sit down and watch 2 hours of Netflix? Or would a reader pick up a book and start reading and then go, okay, well, the reader would read, right, so I'm going to read. And the more you approach that in a positive way, like, okay, by doing this action, I'm going to become a reader, then, it's like if you wanted to be an author, if you wanted to do podcasts, or if you wanted to be an engineer, it's the same thing. And once you connect who you want to be as a person with that thing that you're doing, I think it helps put it into a more positive way. Yeah. So I was trying to read that book with the lessons that I learned through this process and reading it in a completely different way.
Wow. What a great new perspective on that. And I know we only have a couple minutes left. So, and I think one of my last questions was how this program has impacted Michael, but I think you all have heard that. So I'm gonna kind of ask Michael the same question that he asked me at the beginning, is how do you think mental fitness impacts leaders within the construction industry?
So why should people in the construction industry care about mental fitness? There's quite a lot of things I could say on this. One thing I want to start off with is there's a bit of a stigma attached to mental well-being and mental health. When we start calling it mental fitness and recognizing it's exactly the same as physical fitness, that, if you want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you want to be someone that's really fit and healthy, you go to the gym every day, or you go to the gym at least 2 or 3 times a week at least. And you know that doing it once isn't going to work. You've got to do it consistently. You've got to do it over time. And I think this is the same as mental fitness, that if you want to get yourself really mentally fit so that you can deal with situations better and that you can be really successful and not suffer as much of the symptoms of mental health and mental well-being issues, then I think, you're motivated to then work on it every single day. And again, I say you only need to do it for 2 minutes at a time, every 3 or 4 hours. And the impact can be tremendous. And what that does is it gets you into a place where you're more open to explore different ideas, to take a back seat on topics, to listen to others, to open up and create those environments in which people can feel safe to come and talk to you about literally anything, but understand that you're not going to be that person to judge them. And as I say, as I've demonstrated, and I've proved to myself many times over these 7 weeks, that the more I apply these skills I've learned, the better outcome I have in all these areas. And the more that people look to me as a person that is positive, is accountable, and can really be trusted with something. And I think we all want that, don't we? In a way, if we all want to be successful, we all need to be trusted to do those things. And it's much better to be able to pull, I say, people to feel drawn to you because you're positive and they can trust you, that you're not going to be judgmental, than to people to be pushed towards you because you have to, because you have a leader in your title. I think that's important, because as I started on this leadership journey at the beginning, when I didn't know what leadership was, and I had authority, but people didn't listen, was because people felt pushed towards having to listen to me and didn't feel valued. Whereas now, and I'm still and forevermore going to be on this leadership journey and also this positive intelligence journey, I'm learning that the more that you can be positive and open and authentic and vulnerable, that's a big thing as well, being vulnerable, then more people feel drawn to you rather than pushed towards you. And I think the more that we can create that, the more we can get out of our own way and really be successful. And I honestly do think that teams in organizations and individuals in organizations really need to practice mental fitness, because if you, and the pitch to CEOs and the pitch to MDs, that if you really care about your business being successful and to be the most innovative, all these great pun words that we use about being brilliant, then you really got to care about people's mental fitness, because once people are more mentally fit, the more innovative, more solution oriented they are, the less time we spend on office politics and arguments and conflict, the more we think about resolutions and solutions and move on and really have great outcomes. So I know that if any organization out there wants to be, and it may be a small organization, but they want to take on the big organizations, all you have to do is really practice good mental fitness and with your team and yourself. And over time, you'll be able to be the big fish in that industry. But also talk about staff retention as well, because staff retention is a massive draw on resources. Not to say that it's also demotivating when people leave an organization, that if you can keep people more mentally fit and more positive, and you're genuinely authentic and you're comfortable with being authentic and being vulnerable, and leading by example, then people, as I say, are going to be drawn to you. So they want to stay with you, because I think people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad leaders. So if you're a good leader and you can positively lead and practice and demonstrate good mental fitness, then people want to stick around. And therefore you're going to be surrounded with great people, and you're going to be surrounded by solution orientated people, and your business and your team and yourself will just grow and be successful. I honestly believe that.
What an amazing testimonial for the program, for the book, Positive Intelligence, for becoming more mentally fit. It was an honor to work with you, Michael. It's been an honor to be on your podcast twice now. Thank you so much to all the listeners. And I think that's all I have for you, Michael.
Well, and again, I just want to thank you, Julie, because I think this has been an incredible process, as I say, life-changing. And I now am a firm believer that if we really want to achieve great things, that you can't do that without having good mental fitness. And I think probably both of us are good examples of that. So, I congratulate you as well in your endeavors, in what you're doing. And thank you for your time and patience, because I know at the start you needed a lot of that. So it's been really enjoyable. And again, it's just lessons that I will now take with me for the rest of my life.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you ever so much.